At one point in the Gospel of John, he told his disciples, believe me for what I'm saying. But if you can't believe me for the words I speak, at the very least, look at the miracles I'm doing and then believe me.
And we are back again for another episode of You Can't Ask That with my cousin here, Pastor Jamison. How are you today?
I'm great, man.
Good.
Yeah.
Good drive down this morning?
Always. Yeah, got some good sleep in.
There's no such thing as a good drive on 75. There's
what?
Not in Cincinnati.
Well, no, not that part of it.
They've been working on that road since I was 5 years old.
And they still are. And after you pass Florence, though, it's nice.
Nice. Well, of course, you get into Kentucky.
Okay. So. Yeah, God's country. I know. I've heard it 1,000 times. How them Wildcats do in the SEC tournament?
Hey, we're moving on. We're worried about the Final Four. That's what we're worried about.
Listen, I can't even say nothing because no teams from Cincinnati made it. Xavier, nope. Cincinnati, nope.
Really? It's unusual for Xavier not to make it.
Yeah, they had a bad. They started good, but it just kind of went downhill.
Well, because they're in Ohio. That's why. So sorry. Anyway. So again, we're back for another episode here. If you are enjoying what you're hearing from us, or if you just like making fun of us, feel free to subscribe, follow, comment. Again, we would love your questions as well so that we can have additional topics to talk about.
That's why I subscribe, because I watch and make fun of us.
Well, that doesn't surprise me. That's why I don't subscribe. So,
okay, I lied. I make fun of you. But.
Well, so when we left off last episode, we were talking about the lost years of Jesus. And, of course, we're in the middle of the Easter season, kind of gearing up for Easter. So I think moving from kind of those younger years of Jesus that we talked about with all the crazy theories and kind of moving into more of his public ministry, I thought we would talk about kind of how he started his public ministry, and that would be kind of started off with a miracle. So I thought we would touch on miracles today, maybe their significance of them. And don't make fun of me for the way I say miracles. Miracles, if that's better. So we touch on the significance of them, maybe the types, and how they kind of correlate to us today and what Jesus does for us.
Yeah, sure. That sounds interesting.
Good deal. Well, so now he starts off his public ministry with a miracle, and why don't you refresh our memory what that miracle is?
Yes, numero uno, he turned the water into wine. So Jesus and his disciples were invited to a wedding. And ironically enough, it was a comedian that I heard that actually said the very first, it was Mark Lowry, the very first miracle that Jesus ever did was one just to keep the party going. It wasn't to show who he was or, any of that stuff. Which actually, he was making a joke about it, but there's actually kind of some truth there. We don't have to dig into that necessarily, but yeah, so that was the first miracle. He took a natural process, which would be to take water. Now, you don't get wine from just water. It's grape juice, right? But there's still a process there. It's like sugary water, plus it, has other natural things in it that turns into wine. And Jesus took the time element out of that completely, and he went straight to the wine. Now, ironically, I heard a couple people at church talking the other day saying that Jesus would never turn water into wine as we know it, but instead it was grape juice. And I think most scholars would disagree with that statement, but here's the caveat to that, is the wine in that day was different than when we think of wine today. It was like, if you think of divvy it out, it was like 4 parts water, 1 part wine. So 4/5 of it was more water.
Well, you couldn't necessarily, from my understanding, just drink the water. There had to be some type of purification process to the water, or you could get sick. And this was one of the ways that they were able to stay hydrated.
Right. It was kind of like being in Mexico. So, yep, exactly. So that was the first miracle, and it was an awesome one.
Now, did we and I tried to find a number, and I found a couple of lists that listed all of them, and I probably should have just counted, but I didn't. Do we know what the exact number of miracles that he performed that are listed in Scripture?
We do know. We don't know. But they know. Like, I forgot what the number is. Yeah.
And now, of course, there's a verse that says that he did many more things, and that would fill the whole book. And
yeah,
so
John said the whole world couldn't even contain all the books written. Okay. Yeah.
Well, so when I was going through and looking at the list of miracles that he performed, really, there was 4 main groups that I kind of lumped all the miracles into, and then we had kind of a couple one-offs that really didn't necessarily fit into those 4 groups. But so the 4 groups that I came up with was that he would provide for people in need, which would be when he fed the multitude. So he was, speaking, they were hungry, there wasn't enough food for them, so he took the fish and the loaves, and all of a sudden there was an abundance of food for everyone, and he did that on a couple of occasions. Mm-hmm. So he provided for an abundance, so I think that was one category that I came up with. The one that seems to be the most reoccurring in the Scriptures that I could see was that he healed the sick. He also did some exorcisms or removed the evil spirits or demons from possessed people, and then he also raised other people from the dead. So he was not the only person to have been raised from the dead, and a lot of people think that that was Lazarus, but there was actually even more than Lazarus. Mm-hmm. So I mean that happened on more than one occasion as well.
It did,
which is why I put it into a group. So I think it's interesting that. So I started to look at that, and we like to peel back the onion a little bit here. So as I started to look at those groups, kind of analyze it, see how it correlates with me, I started to look at those groups, and I started to think about what we as Christians feel that Jesus does for us. And the first one, obviously, is that he provides for us. He provides for us in our time of need. If we trust in him, and if we turn our issues over to God and let him, and if we get out of his way, basically. So he provides for us, and he tells us that he'll provide for us, and we will live life and live it abundantly. Mm-hmm. So I found that first thing interesting. And then the second one was the healing of the sick, providing comfort and healing for people. Now this one, you and I have had conversations about this before. And I think you see a lot of people who have loved ones that are sick, or people who themselves get sick. Obviously, they call you as a pastor and say, "Pastor, pray for so-and-so to get better," or whatever the situation may be. And then let's just say that they end up not getting better and they end up passing away. Mm-hmm. And then you see they may get angry, say, why does God let this happen? God didn't love them. God, why would he do that? And there's just this bitterness and this anger. And this became kind of, I realized this when my mom passed away. My mom had been sick for a long, long time. She lived in a lot of pain. We're constantly praying for her to feel better and to have comfort and healing. And when she passed away, and I kind of spoke about this a little bit at her funeral, but, one of the things I noticed when I was back in her house after she had passed away, and it was just quiet, and I kind of got to just reflect on her, that God did provide what I asked for. I asked for her to be healed, and she's now with God in heaven. She doesn't hurt anymore. She has no pain. She's not coughing all hours of the night. So he did heal her, but it wasn't a temporary healing just for me to spend more time with her. He's healed her eternally. She's permanently good now, and she's in a much better place than she would have been here in discomfort. So I think it's one of those, we see it in these miracles of God healing people, but when we ask God to heal people, I think we need to know really what we're asking for in that moment, and that it may not meet what we think the healing process is.
Yeah. I can see that. And okay, so let's not downplay the fact, though, that also that God does love us and not that you're downplaying this fact, but that God does love us and that he does do things for us. Like I can totally see God healing somebody so that we could just spend more time here on earth with that person. So because he loves us, he cares about what we care about. And if we want to spend more time with a family member, that's normal. So I can see God doing that. At the same time, when we talk about death and when we talk about healing, you're right. There's a much bigger picture there because your mom, my dad, who both have passed, they are in a better place and now they don't have to worry about being sick anymore. So God has answered that prayer in a sense, maybe not the way that we wanted him to necessarily, but the prayer's been answered nonetheless. So, I mean, there's definitely, a bigger picture to think about. And plus, as one guy that I like to listen to, he says that if Christianity is true, then really death isn't a thing because nobody dies in a sense. They basically just switch locations. If you die meaning cease to exist, then no, people don't cease to exist. They just move from one place to another is all that happens. So, and that place is much better now. So if we had the chance to say, hey, your mom, hey, Pam, or my dad, Jerry, would you guys want to come back and spend, 10, 15 more years with us here?
Probably say no. Yeah.
Guarantee the answer would be no. Yeah.
Absolutely. So. Absolutely. Well, the fact that you mentioned, death, and we've been talking about death, one of the, so there are two other groups that I categorize for the miracles. The one being, he cast out demons from people who were possessed with demons. And, interestingly enough, they immediately knew who Jesus was. Like the demons were immediately like, we know who you are, almost begging, please don't hurt us. Don't, whatever you're going to do with us. Mm-hmm. I think that really speaks to who he was. Obviously he was walking around as a human, but to be recognized by the spirits so immediately and so fearfully, I think really stood out to me quite a bit. Yeah.
The half brother of Jesus, James, in his letter, he said the devils believe and they tremble. So yeah, and we could actually learn something from that because there's such a lack of respect and fear of God amongst people today. Hey, demons that are so much more powerful than we are, they fear him. It would do us well to maybe rethink this lackadaisical attitude we have when either as Christians, when we come into the presence of God, or unbelievers that just do all kinds of vile things, not thinking about any repercussions or offending God in any way. That's not even on their mind. So we could learn a lesson.
Now, do you, I know that there's priests that specialize in exorcisms, in the Catholic Church. Have you ever come across like what you would see in the movies, one of these like possession, demon possessed type situations before? Have you ever encountered that as a pastor?
Not that drastic. Now, I have had friends that have. A friend of mine, he was actually at a church in, I want to say, the Philippines. And he was on a mission trip, and he pastors in Cincinnati. And there was a demon-possessed person that came in to the front of their church during service. And it was like what you read in the scriptures or would see in some of these movies. I've not seen it that drastic. I've come across people that I have felt were under, when you're around them, you can sense something evil about them. And I have felt even in the way they speak, and not necessarily in the way they sounded per se, but the things they were saying, you can tell they were under demonic influence, but it wasn't like head spinning kind of thing, but it's definitely real. Yeah.
Yeah. It kind of freaks me out. Like I can't even, I've watched The Exorcist, and I was okay with that one, but some of those movies, like I think one of them was called The Exorcism of Emily Rose or something like that. I didn't sleep for like a week. Like it messed with me. I don't know why that messes with me so much, but it does. It kind of makes me tremble inside a little bit, and it just freaks me out.
Yeah. Yeah. I did sleep that week. You know why? Because I didn't watch it. No, not me. Yeah. So funny story, just real quick on the movie The Exorcist. So my grandfather, okay, so back in the day when we had like TV guides, and things when we were kids, and younger.
So this is not our grandfather, but
Papa Buttram. I'm sorry.
Yeah, on your mom's side.
Yeah. So my mom's dad, he was watching TV one night, and I had seen in the TV guide that The Exorcist was going to be on this one channel. Well, he didn't know what it was, right? So he's flipping channels, and he stops on that station, and for some reason it was just him and I at the house that night. And he sits in the living room. It's dark outside. It's dark in the living room. He's just watching with the TV on only, right? I mean, it's not like, it's not like there's a computer in the corner. Like today, everything is electronics in front of us and lights and stuff. No, it was just a dark room and the TV, and that was it. And so I'm like, I knew it was The Exorcist. And like I said, I was a young guy. And I saw him stop on that movie, and I saw they were in the catacombs. There was like a tomb, and the smoke was coming up. It was just freaky scene. He just happened to be on this freaky scene when he stopped on this channel, and I knew what it was. I freaked out because I'm like, there's a demon that's going to come out of the TV and possess us all.
Poltergeist.
So yeah, exactly. So I take off running upstairs. Well, because him and I were the only ones home, none of the lights were on upstairs either. So I ran into my mom's room. She had one of them touch lamps. You remember you would touch it 3 times, turn it on, and it would get brighter, and then it would go off. So I touch it once because I was like, I need light. It's darkness. There's demons downstairs. I hit the lamp, and of all days, the lamp decides to malfunction, and the light's on, off, on, off, on, off, on, off. Dude, I almost my pants. I was like, oh no, I got to get out of here. So I ran downstairs. I was like, turn the channel. So I don't know why. It's just one of the stories that sticks out to me. But yeah, but that stuff does freak me out. Even as an adult, I can't do it. So,
well, I think it, but we take comfort though in knowing that Jesus did have power to cast out the demons. He has power to remove evil from our life if we're willing to believe and we're willing to invoke his name. And I think a lot of the healing miracles, it wasn't that Jesus necessarily touched them. It wasn't by his touch. It wasn't oftentimes it was because you have faith.
Yeah.
And because you believe this is done.
Yep.
So that's pretty interesting too, that it's really, a lot of these miracles come down to just believe that that he can do it, that it's possible, that there's power in his name, and he is who he is. Mm-hmm. So.
Absolutely. In Matthew chapter 9, he actually tells a guy, he says, according to your faith, be it unto you. And that verse has always just stuck with me. I think sometimes we don't see things that we pray for. We talked about praying and God didn't answer it this way. Sometimes it is because God knows better, and he loves us. So he doesn't always give us what we ask for, because he knows what's better than we do. But there are times too, when I think we don't really utilize the power that is within us, which is his spirit within us, and exercise that faith. Because Jesus also said in Matthew chapter 7, ask and it will be given to you, seek you'll find, knock and the door will be opened. And that word ask, I actually looked up the Greek word to that, and the word is aiteo, and it actually means to crave or to beg. And I think sometimes we get into this habit in our prayer lives of just saying a quick little prayer before we eat, or a little quick prayer before we go to bed. And, when we can fit it in, we finish our show, say a quick prayer, go to bed. That's our routine at night. We pray a quick prayer before we eat. Then we go to church and we kind of just mention somebody in prayer as a church when we're praying together. And then we move on with our lives. And there's no real sense of, God, I have to have this. Jacob's name was, and I know this isn't the point of this podcast today, but Jacob's name was, Israel. Israel actually means wrestle with God. and that's why Jacob was blessed, because he spent all night wrestling with an angel of the Lord. And I think sometimes we might see some additional blessings in our lives if we would actually take more time in spiritual warfare and fighting in prayer, rather than just having this casual attitude about it. And I'm talking to me first, right? It's really easy to get into that way of thinking, and I'm guilty. But I mean, it's just something to think about, So, anyways,
okay. Well, then the fourth category I had was obviously Jesus conquered death. He raised people from the dead, and then of course there's the resurrection of Jesus himself. So Jesus has not only power over evil, but he has the power over death. Mm-hmm. And that was the kind of the four categories I had put together. And then there was these kind of one-offs that really didn't fit into a category. There was the changing the water to the wine, which I thought about putting into the providing for and providing abundance. That could fit there. Mm-hmm. But all of those, including the water to the wine, revolved around, doing something for other people, providing for other people, healing them, raising them from dead, whatever. But then you had where he calmed the storm when the disciples were in the boat and Jesus was sleeping. And again, O ye of little faith. So faith comes into play there. And then Jesus walking on the water. So those two, and withering of the fig tree were kind of the ones that I was trying to figure out where to place those in those categories. But there did seem to be a reoccurring theme with the four categories that presented to me. So
absolutely. And I wouldn't necessarily add a fifth category, but also, just kind of as a side note, some of these are Jesus showing his lordship over nature, walking on the water, calming the storm, turning water into wine, the withering of the fig tree. So these showing his lordship over his creation as well. So I don't know if that could be a fifth category, but I mean, at least I think it's noteworthy.
Definitely.
So,
well, so the significance of the miracles. I mean, him doing these miracles ended up playing a role, I think, as you move on through the Easter story, the Passion story. Oftentimes when Jesus would perform a miracle, he would basically say, "Don't tell anyone about this." And of course, they all ran off and told someone about it, as I probably would too. But he started to get kind of a following for being this healer and performing these miracles and these great signs. And so he was starting to get a lot of attention, starting to gather crowds when he would teach, but he was also starting to draw the attention of the Pharisees, who never actually denied him doing these miracles, but they didn't necessarily like kind of being shown up a little bit, I think. And then I think as we move further into this story, I think we'll see that these miracles were kind of the attention gathering, not that that's what Jesus was wanting, but the attention gathering that kind of started to create a little bit of a conflict with the religious leaders of the day as we move into the Easter story.
Yeah.
So, I think we had talked about, I think that our next episode, we're going to talk about some of the parables, talk about parables that Jesus spoke in and why and all of that. And I think there's an interesting aspect to that that goes into the attention being drawn from the miracles into some things that happened to actually spark that conflict with the Pharisees, and which is kind of what may have prompted some of the parables. So I'm looking forward to talking about that in our next episode.
Yeah, for sure. And there's other questions that we're kind of leaving on the table. For example, are there still miracles today? If so, then where are they? And if not, then why not?
You know what? That's interesting you said, because I was thinking about that driving here to set up, and that are there miracles today? And there are. I mean, but I think I think the birth of a child is a miracle. I mean, the process that has to happen, the risk to the mother, the way the baby's nourished through the whole. I mean, to me, that's an everyday miracle. So I think miracles do occur. They may not necessarily what we consider supernatural. I guess probably how you classify miracles, but I think miracles happen absolutely every day.
Yeah. Yep. Absolutely. And one last thing before we go, let's not forget why Jesus did these miracles also. So in some cases, as you've pointed out, that it was for the benefit of people, right? It was to help other people. I think overall, though, it was to show who he was. And so one of the first miracles that Mark records in Mark chapter 2, there was a man who was paralyzed. And remember, the 4 guys picked him up and carried him to the house where Jesus was. And it was so crowded, they had to tear the roof down away and let the man down through the house. So in that story, Jesus tells the man, the first thing he says to the man isn't be healed. It is, your sins are forgiven. Well, who is this guy to forgive people's sins? Who would he think he's God or something? And then Jesus makes this statement to those watching, especially to the Pharisees, but so that you may know that the Son of Man has power on earth to forgive sins. Then he looked at the man and said, I say to you, rise up, take up your mat, and go home. Jesus did miracles because, they testified to who he was. At one point in the Gospel of John, he told his disciples, believe me for what I'm saying. But if you can't believe me for the words I speak, at the very least, look at the miracles I'm doing and then believe me. So let's not leave that part out. I think that's probably one of the most important things. Why did he do miracles? And that is because it was evidence as to who he really is.
Good note to end on right there.
Yeah.
Excellent. Good stuff. All right. Well, again, please subscribe, follow, comment, and we will be back shortly for another episode.